Welcome to In the Loop with Christian Bryant. I am not him. I am today's substitute teacher, Cody LeGros, and like most subs, we do get to play by our own set of rules, but we do have a rubric to follow. In tonight's lesson plan, surveillance for sale, why the US government is putting Chinese tech companies in the hot seat. Plus, NFTs are changing the digital art world, but are they here to stay? But first, let's hit you with the headlines.
Let me be clear. We will get to the bottom of this. We will do all that is within our power to make sure that justice is done for Daunte Wright.
We're learning new details today about a traffic stop that led to the death of a black man in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota over the weekend. The death of 20-year-old Daunte Wright is already sparking new protests. So how did this happen? The Brooklyn Center police chief said he believes his officer meant to draw their taser, but drew their handgun, ultimately shooting and killing Daunte Wright. We want to warn you, this video is hard to watch. The chief called it an accidental discharge.
The officer, while struggling with Mr. Wright, shouts, "Taser, taser," several times. That is part of the officer's training prior to deploying a taser, which is a less lethal device. During this encounter, however, the officer drew their handgun instead of their taser.
A body camera video released by Brooklyn Center Police claims to show Wright struggling to get away from an officer. Another officer shouts taser, but instead pulls their handgun and shoots Wright. Wright called his mom when he was first getting pulled over, and she was on the phone for most of the incident.
I heard scuffling, and I heard the police officer say, "Daunte, don't run," and then the other officer said, "Put the phone down," and hung it up. And then a minute later, I called, and his girlfriend answered, which was the passenger in the car, and said that he'd been shot, and she put it on the driver's side, and my son was laying there lifeless.
The shooting happened in Brooklyn Center, a city just 10 miles from Minneapolis, where former police officer Derek Chauvin is currently on trial for the murder of George Floyd, which has already put the city on edge. In response, the National Guard has been deployed and a curfew has been issued in some cities. Meanwhile, in Virginia, a Windsor police officer was recently fired after a video of a traffic stop from back in December went viral.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, dude, you should be. Get out. Get out!
The man behind the wheel is Karan Nazario, a Black and Latino Army lieutenant. According to the lawsuit, the officers pulled him over for not having a license plate on his new Tahoe. Nazario says even after they knew he had temporary plates, they reported the stop as a high-risk felony, pulled their weapons, illegally detained him, pepper sprayed him, and searched his vehicle. Nazario is now seeking $1 million in damages, while Virginia's governor has called for an independent investigation. Michigan is pleading for more vaccines as they become a COVID hotspot, but the federal government said no. It plans to stick to its distribution plan, which bases doses on the state's population.
Our ability to vaccinate people quickly in each of those states, rather than taking vaccines and shifting it to playing whack-a-mole, isn't the strategy that public health leaders and scientists have laid out.
The surge Michigan is dealing with is unlike others, since most of these cases are from the variant that originated in the UK and is now the dominant strain in the US. Michigan is seeing a rise in hospitalization rates in younger people. Experts say this could be a warning sign of what's to come for the rest of the country if we are not careful. The COVID fatigue is real, but the reality is we are still a ways away from herd immunity. Daily vaccine administrations are knocking it out of the park, but the US is about to hit another hurdle: vaccine hesitancy. More states are reporting unclaimed vaccine appointments, which health experts say reflects the people who are reluctant to get the shot. Right now, nearly 40% of the US population has been fully vaccinated, but experts predict we need 60 to 80% for herd immunity. Congress clocked back into Washington this weekend, and now that the crew is back in the Capitol, they got lots to do. Immigration, mass shootings, President Biden's $2.3 trillion jobs and infrastructure plan. Of course, the right and left are divided on passing solutions to any of those things, and despite Dems having control, they'd likely need to weaken the filibuster to allow simple majority to advance any legislation. But that's not looking likely either. The White House has already started meeting with lawmakers to start moving toward a vote on infrastructure plans.
It's about investing in infrastructure not for the 20th century, but the 21st century. It's not just roads and bridges. We're investing in water systems so Americans can have clean water infrastructure. We're investing in high-speed rail infrastructure. We're building charging stations to support America's electric vehicle future, and investing in that infrastructure.
There's a lot of distrust between the US and Chinese governments, especially when it comes to how tech companies from each nation operate across borders. Now, there are some new red flags popping up around how Chinese companies with surveillance tech might pose a national security risk stateside. Newsy's Sasha Ingber has the story.
It looks like any other wireless security camera you could buy on Amazon. But this one is made by Daunte, one of a few Chinese surveillance providers the U.S. Defense Department and NASA are banned from doing business with. The government says the companies support China's military, meaning whatever the camera sees could end up there.
The idea that the footage can be taken by the Chinese is not even theoretical. It is absolutely verified.
That's retired Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who previously led strategy for the National Security Council at the White House.
Having a device in your home is the same as if you had a tunnel that had been dug from an enemy's location up through your house, coming in through your living room.
But there's more. The U.S. blacklisted Daunte for human rights abuses. An estimated 1 million people have been sent to internment camps in China, the Biden administration calling it genocide. Daunte is accused of contributing by sharing its technology to monitor minorities, especially an ethnic group called Uyghurs.
Now, an investigation into Daunte's own software shows it tracks specifically whether someone is a Uyghur.
With a few clicks, Newsy found Daunte cameras being sold in plain sight on Amazon, and there are no warnings alerting customers of government ties or human rights violations. That's also true of China's Hikvision, a company accused by the U.S. of the same transgressions, and that bills itself as the world's largest manufacturer of video surveillance products. Hikvision's digital storefront still stands, along with a subsidiary whose products include a baby monitor compatible with Amazon Alexa. Other shops sell the company's products and have names like DC Security, even though they're based in China. Selling their products isn't illegal, but it does raise ethical questions for tech analysts like Lindsay Gorman.
Companies like Amazon need to have robust due diligence practices and do a scan of all their products, where they source them, and understand really deeply the connections between those products and some of the abuses we've seen.
Officials from Hikvision and Daunte tell Newsy they aren't connected to China's military or the repression of civilians. A Hikvision spokesperson says it's engaging with governments globally to clarify misunderstandings. Amazon says it aspires to be the Earth's most customer-centric company and tells us it's still in compliance with the law. But an employee, speaking on condition of anonymity, says there's too much to keep track of. Candidly, Amazon is too big. The company also says it hastily purchased Daunte thermal cameras in 2020 to protect employees from COVID-19, but doesn't intend on buying more. From Washington, Sasha Ingber, Newsy.
When you're back, we're unpacking the trends, tearing up Twitter. Welcome back to In the Loop. Go ahead and grab your popcorn salad. We're going to the movies. The BAFTAs, aka the British Oscars, are once again acting as a predictor for the Academy Awards later this month. Nomadland took home Best Picture, also scoring a win for Chloe Zhao as Best Director and Frances McDormand for Best Leading Actress. Anthony Hopkins won for Best Leading Actor in The Father, and Best Supporting Actress went to Ye Jung-yoon in Minari. Best Supporting Actor to Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah. New voting procedures allowed for a surge in diverse nominations after facing the controversy #BAFTAsSoWhite. 16 of the 24 actors nominated in the performance categories came from a racial or ethnic minority. The British Academy's new system, which is essentially providing a list of films you are required to watch before taking part in the first round of voting, levels the playing field a bit. It's less a diversity quota and more, hey, you have to watch this before you could say it's better or worse than that. Now look, I am a child of the Midwest, okay? My blood type is cream. I bathe in Crisco. I know 100 ways to use mayonnaise, okay? But this is not okay. This is a popcorn salad, and it's making the internet lose its mind.
Midwestern. I'm from Kansas and we ain't never ate nothing like this.
The Food Network posted this video that Newsweek branded as a monstrosity. The recipe includes white cheddar seasoned popcorn, mayonnaise, mustard, carrots, and celery leaves. Just like Mom used to make. I mean, what in the Hellmans. We started the pandemic with all of us making sourdough bread, and now our efforts are dwindling. It's all part of this trend right now and people getting a little unnecessarily creative with basic ingredients. I mean, have we forgotten about the Nature's cereal trend? Those were just unblended smoothies branded as a whole new thing, okay? So if you're cooking for clout, just say that, but don't you dare bring this popcorn salad to the potluck. Taylor Swift re-released her album Fearless. Maybe you listened to it, maybe you didn't. Maybe it's still sticking with you. Just roll the tape, please. Here's why this matters in the music industry. Swift originally released Fearless in 2008 under music label Big Machine. And long story short, Scooter Braun bought the label in 2019, ended up owning the rights to Swift's master recordings, and then sold those off to another company. In the spirit of reclaiming ownership, Swift re-recorded the music in an effort to decrease the value of the originals. She did this so she can be the one who cashes in should anyone stream or license something like Love Story in the future. And the Swifties are streaming, okay? Forbes showed us Taylor commanded 60% of the entire top 10 on Spotify with her re-releases. And this move could make her one of the most successful artists in Hot 100 history. So yes, fans say Swift is taking back what's hers, whereas the LA Times said only she could make bare-knuckled capitalism feel like a moral act. Speaking of priceless art, NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are digital art bought with cryptocurrency. And some of these artists are making bank. But how long until this bubble bursts? Newsy's Stephanie Sandoval explains the value of these digital collectibles.
NFTs have grown in popularity over the last few months, and some have sold for millions. This NFT, created by digital artist Beeple, sold for $69 million, catching the attention of artists everywhere. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are unique pieces of digital content, meaning you can't touch them. Take this album from Kings of Leon, or this dunk by LeBron James. These are all collectible digital footprints that hold value to the buyer. NFTs are unique, digital assets bought and sold in online marketplaces like OpenSea and stored on the blockchain, a digital ledger used to record transactions. Business strategist Ethan Slotkin says NFTs are a great opportunity.
It's like a really great way for any business to be super creative and provide something with utility. The question is just, how cool is it? How much do people trust your business?
This one is Van Gogh riding a horse.
Stephen Evans, a local artist in Columbia, Missouri, is new to the world of NFTs. His brother made 10 copies of this painting he drew of cats.
Bow chicken meow meow.
Starting at 0.069 Ether, a type of cryptocurrency, which is worth about $143 as of Friday.
I think it's just a different way to connect people, and I think that's probably one of the coolest things about it.
Anyone can make one. Celebrities like Tom Brady and Paris Hilton are converting some of their merchandise to digital goods. Companies like NBA Top Shot, a site that is essentially replacing NBA trading cards and making them digital, are capitalizing from it as well.
If something's speaking to you, how do you put value on that?
There have been lots of questions about how long NFTs will last and what they'll be valued at.
As long as you can provide a real use case to these assets, they will gain in value, or they will at least keep their value.
Guthier Zupinger is one of the co-founders of nonfungible.com, a website that tracks NFT projects and marketplaces. The average price of an NFT spiked in mid-February at around $4,000.
I mean, this, new generation of people that are probably spending too much, but who am I to consider they are paying too much?
Now sales are averaging at around $1,200. There's been speculation that this is just a market bubble due to the sudden hype and will burst or has already burst. In order to maintain the platform and the blockchain technology that hosts NFTs, sellers have to pay fees to sell their work. For Stephen Evans' brother, it costs $90 in fees to put the NFTs online. Now they just wait for a buyer.
I painted this, and I call it my masterpiece.
But for him, it's not about making the big bucks.
Something inside me has something to say, and I see NFTs as a way to share my story. That would just be best, but just how you would have guessed as he took a leap.
Stephanie Sandoval, Newsy.
After the break, how a hashtag brought harm to an entire race. When it comes to emerging infectious diseases, history shows us how countries place blame on other nations when a new crisis occurs. Look at the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. The first recorded case? Yeah, it was in Kansas. But the pandemic got its name because Spain first accurately reported the outbreak, bolstering the perception it was more concentrated there. I mean, in Spain, they called it the French flu. Okay, so people have been pointing fingers. Fast forward 100 years, okay? The blame game leveled up with the power of social media. And former President Trump referred to COVID-19 as the, quote, Chinese virus on Twitter. Newsy's Tyler Atkinson explains how a hashtag gave rise to hate against the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities.
Go to your own country.
A year into the pandemic, anti-Asian discrimination on social media is still shaping real-world speech. A recent study of Twitter data found a dramatic increase in the use of the hashtag Chinese virus, along with anti-Asian rhetoric, in the days after then-President Trump first tweeted it.
Before March 16th, the dominant term was COVID-19, and once he used the term Chinese virus in his tweet, the dominant term became Chinese virus.
Researcher Yulin Xuen analyzed Twitter data a week before and after Trump first tweeted that hashtag. Tweets containing the Chinese virus hashtag were more likely to include another racist hashtag than tweets that used COVID-19. Xuen says that hashtag, along with Trump's influence and reach, concerned her because the World Health Organization specifically advises against naming new diseases for specific places or groups of people. It says those names are stigmatizing.
Hashtags are very much linked to real-world hate crimes because they are a way of aggregating and joining people who have similar interests, and they're easy to find. It's a tag to say these are my feelings and sentiments towards a particular group or particular topic.
Social media companies have been non-committal when it comes to removing these hashtags.
Why do you still allow these hashtags on your platforms?
It's useful to remember that a lot of these hashtags do contain counterspeech, and people on the other side of it do own them and show why this is so terrible and why it needs to stop.
We need to be clear about when someone is saying something because they're using it in a hateful way versus when they're denouncing it.
But Xuen doesn't feel those arguments pass muster.
You don't use the N-word to advocate not to use the N-word frequently.
Tyler Atkinson, Newsy, Chicago.
Coming up, we're taking you to the dungeons. Don't worry, there will be dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, known as D&D by the diehards, is a tabletop game that turns the fantastical into fun for like 5 hours, minimum. And in these types of games, character development is integral to the entertainment. And picking your character's race is a part of that process. For example, my race in one recent D&D session was High Elf, because obviously. But after national conversation over racial injustice, many D&D adventurers are re-examining the role of race and the characteristics attached to each of them within the game. Explaining how when you know better, you do better, here's my favorite dungeon master, Newsy's Matt picked.
Fantasy stories can be a fun bit of escapism, and everyone can use a nice break from reality now and again. Especially now. But even the most out-there fiction and fantasy role-playing still has to reckon with its real-world baggage from time to time. And one such reckoning is underway for the popular tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons.
when I'm playing these games and when I'm telling these stories, I want myself and the people I'm playing with to have a good time. And if any aspect of it is making that harder for someone or for multiples of us, then we sit and we figure it out.
Gabriel Hicks is a game designer, voice actor, and cosplayer who's worked on a number of tabletop games, including some D&D game books, and he's gained a dedicated following for his work. He's also one of the many people who've been playing Dungeons & Dragons over the internet in this quarantine era.
When you analyze, you do this. Don't do that. Don't do that.
The iconic tabletop role-playing game has exploded in popularity over the past couple of years, thanks to a more accessible version of the game and the rise of high-profile D&D podcasts.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter the Adventure Zone.
And streaming shows.
Welcome to Critical Role, where a bunch of us nerdy-ass voice actors sit around and play Dungeons & Dragons.
The game's renaissance spiked even more after COVID-19 hit. Virtual D&D services have reported massive growth in users over the past few months. But amid waves of demonstrations calling for racial justice across America, D&D's parent company Wizards of the Coast admitted their game has its flaws in how it handles race, flaws that date back to the game's origins in the 70s.
Yeah, I think it's really just something that people were used to, because as we get older and smarter and learn more, we discover we use things that are archaic ideologies or terms.
The topic of race comes up surprisingly often in these tabletop games. One of the few things D&D players do when starting a game is to pick what kind of character they want to be, an elf, a dwarf, a human, etc. The game refers to this process as choosing your, quote, race. The game's mechanics attach physical traits to each race. For example, all orc characters tend to start out stronger and dumber than their human counterparts. Those distinctions obviously don't perfectly line up with a real-world concept of race. But the idea that certain kinds of sentient beings are naturally stronger or smarter than other types is still a troubling one for many people.
I don't like that we are bound to those stereotypes, to be honest. If there is an orc wizard who has spent the first 3 lives as a wizard literally just reading and learning and understanding, it would make sense if they're smarter rather than stronger.
A few months back, Hicks released his own unofficial module for D&D, which ties a character's physical attributes to their job rather than their race. For Hicks, the module helps players explore characters that are less hemmed in by their fantasy species.
There was a bunch of people who said, well, Gabe, it doesn't make sense because they're an orc or they're a minotaur, so they have to be stronger. And it's not a good argument, because this is a world where there's a canonical magical jar that can make gallons of mayonnaise. Anything can be possible.
Dungeons & Dragons didn't create those trends, of course, and it's not solely responsible for ending them. But as more and more people flock to the game, it's facing an increasing need to expand its storytelling to fit its audience.
I love this game, but no person or corporation in general is infallible. And you want to hope for the best, but you also still have a personal right to want to hold people accountable.
As always, thank you for watching In the Loop and for sticking with the fill-in host on a Monday in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, have no fear. Christian Bryant will be back tomorrow. Until then, I'm Cody LeGros. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.